I caught my wife with my best friend, but that was just the beginning. What I uncovered next blew the lid off our town, and no one saw it coming. Hey there, and welcome to what I can only call the circus that is my life right now. Let me take you into the courtroom where this story really begins, or at least where it starts to unravel publicly. One more outburst from you, Mr. Carson, and I'll be forced to hold you in contempt of court. That was Judge Henley, looking about as red-faced as a tomato at a summer farmer's market. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing at her expression. It was almost cartoonish in how flustered she looked. My lawyer, Mr. Travis Young, who, believe it or not, I'd end up working with down the line, leaned in and whispered, "You need to zip it or you're going to end up spending the night in a holding cell." He wasn't joking. This wasn't my first warning of the day. The thing is, I have a habit, okay, maybe a bad habit, of speaking my mind a little too freely, especially when I'm fired up. I once had a buddy tell me, "Eli, I've never met someone who drops that word more than you do." He wasn't wrong. Some things just roll out of your mouth before you've got a chance to filter them. And today was one of those days. As I opened my mouth again, pure instinct, both the judge and my attorney tensed. I caught the court reporter stifling a grin, probably bracing herself for whatever rant might be about to escape me. I wasn't the most traditional courtroom presence, I'll admit. Across the courtroom, the scene was something straight out of a bad soap opera. On the bench sat my former best friend, his wife, and my soon-to-be ex-wife. The tension hanging around them was so thick you could have carved it with a snow shovel. Lindsay, my wife for just a little while longer, looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Her eyes stayed downcast and the life had just drained out of her face. Ben, my ex-best friend, had the nerve to look smug like this was just some business meeting he was nailing. And then there was Cheryl, Ben's wife, arms crossed, jaw locked, and a look on her face that screamed, "This is not how I thought this would go." I don't blame her. Watching your marriage implode under the courtroom lights isn't exactly something you put on your vision board. Now, you're probably wondering how exactly I ended up in this mess, getting scolded by a judge who clearly thinks the robe gives her a halo. Well, let's rewind the tape a little. Let's call it Tuesday. Because that's what it was, a regular Tuesday. My name's Eli Carson. I'm 32 and I work for the city maintenance crew here in Maple Glen, Colorado. Started 2 days after I tossed my high school cap in the air. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. In the winter, I'm the guy clearing snow off the main road so folks can get to work. Summer? You name it, repairs, patching, tree removal, water lines. Whatever's needed. Lindsay, she'd take a few shifts a week over at the church, mostly just to get out of the house. Said it was a good mental break from the daily grind. I didn't argue. We weren't rolling in money, but we had what we needed. Our department split up into 4 sectors across the city. Each sector has its own boss and a foreman, me being one of them. I'd earned my spot through years of sweat and some busted knuckles, not by being anyone's favorite. Anyway, things were fine. Or so I thought. You know how they say trouble doesn't knock? It just kicks the door in? Well, that Tuesday it didn't just kick. It took the whole damn door off the hinges. Now, let me make something real clear. I'm not a supervisor. Never have been. Those jobs usually go to guys with college degrees, and that's not me. I rely more on plain old common sense, and in this line of work, that tends to get you farther anyway. But the title? No, that was never in the cards. Plus, let's be honest, I'm not about to do what some folks around here do to climb the ladder, if you catch my drift. Not my thing. Never has been. Funny thing is, even though I'm not a supervisor, they still come to people like me before making decisions. It's kind of an unspoken rule. If one of the bosses wants a crew to do something, they usually ask someone like me first. Someone who's been in the trenches and knows what's what, just to avoid wasting everyone's time. Now here's how the structure works. All the foremen? They started out like me, worked their way up through years of sweat and early mornings. The supervisors, though? They were hired indirectly. Desk guys with resumes mostly. They do fine, I guess, but they don't always know the ground-level grind the way we do. Anyway, Monday evening we got slammed by one of those nasty summer storms that tend to roll through in June. High winds, sideways rain, hail big enough to make dents in the city trucks. It hit my quadrant the hardest. We were up to our necks in downed limbs, shredded trees, and all sorts of debris clogging the streets. I had 6 crews out in dump trucks just hauling junk off the roads. Meanwhile, I was out in my city-issued pickup with a clipboard and a list of street flooding complaints. I'd drive out to each spot, checking storm drains to see if they were backed up. If they were clogged, I'd radio for one of the 2 vacuum trucks we had on hand. We also had 4 street sweepers running from morning till late afternoon. And when I got a minute to breathe, I drove down the alleys that always flood out or turn into mud pits just to see how bad they were. I knew we'd have to dump some gravel soon. That's another job for the week ahead. One thing we didn't get to that day? The parks. None of the 3 in my zone got mowed, and that meant I'd need to shift a crew over there come Tuesday morning. Always something. Now home life. Robin, my wife, and I lived in a decent 2-story 4-bedroom place tucked into one of the older parts of town. We weren't living it up like the folks out on the southwest side, where the lawns are manicured and the HOA fines you for leaving a trash can out too long. But we also weren't stuck in the rough east side either, where sirens are more common than songbirds. We were somewhere in the middle, and honestly, that suited us just fine. We had great neighbors too. Tom and Jenny McBain lived next door. Behind us were Ron and Cindy, and just beyond them was Bruce Harris, my oldest friend, and his wife, Melissa. Bruce and I? We go way back. I'm talking middle school mischief and scraped knees. If I had $1 for every time I dragged that guy into trouble, I'd have a cabin in the Rockies by now. Bruce's parents were the fire and brimstone type, always preaching right from wrong. My folks? They couldn't have cared less. My dad used to tell me, as long as you don't knock some girl up and cost me money, I don't care what you do. And he meant it. Most of the time, I was out doing who knows what while Bruce was getting grilled over every little thing. If something smelled like trouble, chances are I was behind it, and Bruce? Well, he was usually just trying to keep up. Back when we were kids, whenever Bruce got blamed for something I did, I'd just step up and tell the truth. I didn't care what his folks thought of me, they'd already made up their minds. I was the bad influence, the kid they didn't want him hanging around. Their opinion of me never held much weight. Bruce stuck close to their values as he got older. If anything, he clung to them even tighter. He went off to a Bible college, got ordained, and now he's the head pastor at one of the churches just a few miles from here. Preaches every Sunday without fail. Me? I'm more of a show-up for Christmas Eve and Easter morning kind of guy. I was never much for the whole fire and brimstone thing. Robin, though, she's a regular. Sunday service, midweek dinners, holiday choirs, you name it. She never misses. That night, all I wanted was to kick back with a 12-pack and watch the sun go down. But one glance at the calendar, and that red circle around the date, told me I'd have to settle for just one. Red days meant I was on emergency standby for the city. If something went wrong, like a sewer backup, a water line break, or a tree down on a power line, I'd be the guy they called, no questions asked. No beer buzz allowed. Robin was in the shower while I picked at my dinner. I couldn't help thinking about how much attention she gave to her 45-minute showers lately, and how little of that focus ever came my way. I mean, I used to joke about it, but deep down it stung. A man notices when he's being ignored. It was just after 7 p.m., and I remember thinking I might not even see her the rest of the evening. These days, she seemed to vanish behind bathroom doors or church walls, always slipping through the cracks of our routine. Earlier that day, work had been chaos. A busted water main had torn up half a street downtown, and we had to dig out a massive trench to reach the broken pipe. The water crew finally got it patched up around 8:45 a.m., and by 9:30 the city inspector had signed off on the fix. We spent the rest of the morning prepping for repaving, though that part would be handled by a contractor. By lunchtime we were wrapping up and I had the equipment back at the yard by 1 p.m. At 1:45 I pulled into my driveway, knowing I was officially off duty until Friday. That should have felt like a relief, but something about the house felt empty. When I walked in, the place was quiet. No sign of Robin. I figured maybe she'd run out for groceries or stopped by the church. But still, something felt off. Then came the shock. Out back, something caught my eye through the upstairs window. Across the yard, over near the McBains, I saw Brenda, Tommy and Jenny's niece, half-dressed and tangled up in what can only be described as a very private moment. Not with her boyfriend either. Let's just say the guy she was with didn't match any face I recognized. It was unsettling. That kind of thing you only expect to hear about in gossip columns or some small-town scandal in the Deep South. I knew I shouldn't be watching. I really did. But my feet didn't move and my eyes didn't blink. I just stood there, stunned, like I'd been frozen in place. I couldn't help but wonder, did Tom or Jenny have any clue what was happening under their roof? They weren't exactly Puritans, but even the most laid-back people I knew wouldn't be okay with what I saw. And then, just to make the weirdness even worse, Brenda and Tommy showed up in my driveway not long after. They looked like they were about to face a firing squad. Brenda gave me this sheepish half-smile, the kind you offer when you know you've been caught in something shameful. "We're sorry for the disturbance, Mr. Carson," she said, voice quiet. "We didn't mean to offend you. It's just..." I didn't let her finish. I cut her off with a flat look. "Look, I don't care what the two of you do. Whatever's going on isn't my concern. Honestly, you're not even close to the top of my list right now. That's all I said before turning away from Brenda and Tommy. They didn't say a word, just nodded awkwardly and walked back toward their place. Still, I could feel Brenda's eyes on me as I headed back inside, like she wanted to say something more but knew better. Inside, the walls felt like they were closing in. My thoughts were loud, messy. I couldn't believe what had become of everything. I yelled out loud, not even sure who I was talking to anymore. Anyone who defends that kind of behavior ought to have their head caved in with a cinder block. I didn't mean it literally, I was just furious, unraveling at the seams. That's when she said it. You don't have to be angry. I'm still here. I'm not leaving. She had the nerve to say that. After everything. No, you're not, I said through clenched teeth. You've already made your choice. You picked Bruce over me, over our marriage. You can't even spare 5 minutes to look me in the eye, but you can bend over for him the second he calls? That's rich. My head was throbbing. I dropped into a chair and cradled my face in my hands, trying to block it all out. She stood up, maybe to walk away again, but I raised my voice. Sit down. Don't walk away from this. I hope whatever this is, whatever you think you've found, is worth throwing away a decade of marriage. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't want one. I went about the only thing I had control over, my space. I changed out all the lock sets on the doors, reset the garage code, and cut her off from everything that used to be ours. That house was mine now, and she wasn't welcome. By 4 o'clock I was drained. Physically, emotionally, completely wiped out. I flopped down on the couch and flicked on the TV. Jerry Springer was on. Of course. That day's episode? Cheating wives and broken families. Fitting, I muttered. But I didn't make it far. I passed out before the first chair got thrown on screen. When I woke up, it was dark outside and nearly 9:30 p.m. Someone was knocking at the door. I groaned and pulled myself up, half asleep, and peeked through the window. It was Bruce. I didn't even bother opening it. Whatever he had to say, I didn't want to hear it. I walked away without a word. From the window, I noticed headlights bouncing off the back of Bruce's house. Tom was getting home from the restaurant. He worked nights, so this was routine. But what happened next sure wasn't. Tom walked out back, right to the pool, and started stripping down like it was a normal summer night. I stood in the shadows, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And then, Bruce joined him. Right there in the water, the two of them embraced like it was nothing new. What did I do to deserve this? I whispered. The two of them were close, too close. I could hear them talking like I was sitting poolside with them. How was work, babe? Bruce asked. Busy, Tom replied. Had to fire one of the kids. Total grind. I just sat there in silence, in disbelief. Later that night, I tried to drown it out with noise. I tuned into an old college radio station that played underground death metal. Tracks from bands like Deicide, Obituary, and Carcass blasted through my headphones. It was chaos, brutal and loud, but somehow it matched my state of mind. Just before the show ended, they played Make Them Suffer by Cannibal Corpse. And there it was, something inside me locked onto that chorus. With Corpse Grinder's growl echoing through my brain, I found myself whispering, I will. I swear I will. The next morning, I was shaken awake by pounding on the door. I didn't care who it was. I slammed it shut in their face and went straight to the kitchen. Bacon sizzled on the pan as I muttered to myself, screw their reputation. Screw the smiles. I can't believe people ever bought into their act. I couldn't stop thinking about it, the way they tried so hard to look pure and perfect, hiding behind polite smiles and Sunday clothes, while carrying on behind my back. All that fake wholesomeness while they were sneaking around with my wife. And just like that, Corpse Grinder's words echoed back into my head, make them suffer. So I decided I would. The next day I called up a guy I used to work with, Terry, a grader operator from the South End. A few years ago, his divorce was the talk of the department. His wife had been caught in bed with her stepbrother, and somehow, Terry still managed to walk away with almost everything. House, truck, tools, he kept it all. I figured if anyone knew a good divorce attorney, it'd be him. He gave me a name and I wrote it down like it was sacred scripture. Sunday came and I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I went to church. Not for faith, not for forgiveness. Just curiosity. And maybe a little bit of spite. Bruce was preaching that morning, standing tall in front of the congregation with his Bible and his perfect hair, pretending to be this upstanding man of God. It was laughable. I sat there in the back row, watching him talk about honesty and redemption while I knew full well what kind of man he really was. Back at home, I found over 50 messages on the answering machine attached to my dusty landline. Probably folks from the church. Probably her. I didn't listen to a single one. Just hit delete one after the other while sipping a cold beer. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning at work I got busy. First stop? City accounting. See, a while back I'd let my crew haul several loads of gravel over to Bruce's church free of charge. Didn't think much of it at the time. We helped out nonprofits and churches now and then when they needed a hand. But I had kept the tear slips and now I was glad I did. I told Janice in accounting that those deliveries were unauthorized. She raised an eyebrow but nodded. Said she'd make sure it was noted. After that, I called up Tony, a guy from the fire department I'd gone fishing with a few times. Told him there were some safety concerns over at Redeemer Chapel. Just a little tip, you know? Tony didn't need much convincing. These old churches are never fully up to code, he said. We usually give them a pass. But this time? Yeah, we'll give it a close look. Safety's a concern, for the congregation and the neighbors. Next up was Sheila Torres over at the county clerk's office. She mentioned offhandedly that the church property's tax assessment hadn't been reviewed in quite some time. That little nugget went straight onto my to-do list. Meanwhile, I kept watching from a distance, waiting for Tom and Jenny to call the cops. But no, nothing. Not a single squad car, no warning. I guess even they were too embarrassed to draw attention to the circus going on in their backyard. By 5 o'clock, I'd had enough of scheming for the day. I decided to treat myself and drove over to Joe's Pit Barbecue. Their rib platter was legendary, tender, smoky, melt-in-your-mouth kind of good. While I was digging in, I saw someone familiar walk through the door. John Brandon, Cheryl's brother. He was a city engineer and we'd worked on a bunch of road projects together over the years. Solid guy, sharp mind, and not easily fooled. I didn't know what to expect. Would he glare at me? Avoid me? Join me? Before I could figure it out, something even stranger happened. The footage on my home DVR had been running on fast forward, and I was just about to skip ahead to a part one hadn't seen yet when there was a sharp voice from the screen. Hold it right there. Are you Eli Tuber? It was Tommy. And just like that, everything started shifting again. There was a moment, sitting there alone holding that flash drive in my hand, when I felt this sharp sting of embarrassment. It hit me hard. I'd become a regular topic of conversation in the McBain household. They'd been watching this whole thing unfold from their porch swings and living room blinds, talking about me like I was some character in a drama they couldn't turn off. Then Tommy looked me in the eye and said, "Pretend I'm him. Just tell me, what's going on here, man?" I didn't know how to answer. Instead, I started scrolling through the video Brenda had given me. It didn't take long to find the part she wanted me to see. Honestly, I wished she'd cut out the more explicit moments. It was hard enough seeing my own wife like that, even harder knowing someone else had watched it too. But I guess Brenda wanted me to see the full picture. No sugarcoating. No denying it anymore. A couple days later, I went to church again. Not for spiritual healing, more for damage control, I guess. Bruce was up at the pulpit, delivering his usual polished sermon. I sat in the back again trying to blend in, trying not to burst out laughing at the hypocrisy of it all. Right as Bruce wrapped up his sermon, a little boy sitting next to me leaned over and whispered, "You should go up there." His mom didn't even let him finish. She popped him gently on the back of the head, and the poor kid sat straight up. I actually had to chuckle. Bruce began his meet and greet, asking visitors to come forward and introduce themselves. The first was a young brunette. She stepped up confidently and said, "I'm here to see Cheryl Harris." Cheryl looked confused, glancing around, but she walked forward anyway. Then a red-headed teen took the mic and stammered, "I'm here to see Robin Carson." I froze. Robin stepped down slowly from the choir section, joining Cheryl in front of the whole room. The silence was deafening. It was like the congregation collectively held its breath. 2 days later, my lawyer, Mr. Young, gave me a call. "We're scheduled to appear before the Honorable Sonia Kagan in 2 weeks, he said. "Fair warning, she's a tough one. Doesn't go easy on husbands, especially when it comes to dividing assets." I felt my stomach twist. "Any chance she cuts me a break?" "Well," he replied, "you already own the house outright, so she can't touch that. But she's old school. If she finds out Robin cheated, there's a decent chance she'll deny alimony. That's the wild card. We need to build this carefully." Back at work, things were weirdly steady. My immediate supervisor was a kid fresh out of college, eager, polite, but clueless. He never challenged my calls. I ran things in my quadrant the way I always had. Quietly. Decisively. After hours, I'd sometimes meet up with Jimmy, one of the guys from the department. He was awkward as hell when sober, but after a couple of beers the guy was comedy gold. I remember one night at Mob's Tavern, we'd been drinking for maybe 3 hours. Every time one of the frat bros headed toward the restroom, Jimmy would hop up, march in behind them and just stand there staring at them like a prison guard. They all eventually left, probably too nervous to unzip. Even Zeke, the bartender, a literal wall of a man at 6 feet 5 inches and 320 pounds, finally came over, leaned in and told Jimmy, "Cut it out, man. College kids need to pee too." I needed that laugh. Of course, it always circles back to Robin. One of her friends from college, Becky Sanders, came up in conversation again. Becky was notorious to say the least. The night Robin dumped her ex, Jim Smith, she and Becky had a girls' night out. Becky slept with him. Since then, everyone who knew them just called Becky 304, and if you've got a calculator handy, you know what that means upside down. People loved painting Robin as this wholesome church girl, but even her friends had stories. I'd hear the whispers about how Robin would say she felt neglected or unromanced, as if that somehow gave her an excuse to do what she did. "I mean, Jack works a lot of hours," they'd say. "Can you really blame her?" Yeah, I can. I worked Monday through Friday, 7 to 4. I wasn't out gambling or chasing women, I was earning a living. And apparently that wasn't enough. Somewhere in the mess of it all, I remember thinking back to how we once laughed about people peeing in parking lots, joking about redneck life. Now, the metaphor felt fitting. Because somewhere along the line, Robin had turned our marriage into just that, something trashy, something shameless. And I was just now learning how deep the damage really went. I stumbled out of the backyard toward the street, half drunk and half lost in my own head. There was an empty car parked near the curb, and without thinking twice, I stopped in front of it, unzipped, and relieved myself right onto the grill and bumper. Real classy, I know. As I zipped up, I lost my balance a little and leaned against the hood to steady myself. That's when the headlights flicked on, bright, blinding, like judgment itself. I froze like a deer caught doing something dumb, which, to be fair, I was. I mumbled a quick, "Whoops, sorry," and shuffled back toward the bonfire, pretending that hadn't just happened. Back by the fire, I cracked open another beer and tried to push the whole thing out of my mind. That's when I saw her, a familiar woman I'd matched with online, someone I'd been messaging back and forth with for a few days. We'd been making plans to meet up, and now it looked like she was actually going to show. Earlier, I'd asked her to help me spot her in the crowd. I said, "Which one are you, number 13 for the Chargers or 84 for the Broncos?" She laughed and told me what she'd be wearing in vivid detail. I'll admit I was intrigued. So, 45 minutes later, there I was, sitting at Frankie's Cafe, sipping a soda and keeping my eyes on the door. I didn't wear the football jersey like we joked about. I needed a quick exit if things went south. You never know who someone might really be. But right on cue she walked in, dressed exactly like she said she would, and looking stunning, honestly. The kind of woman who turns heads without even trying. And there I was, feeling like a fool. Like some desperate guy chasing validation at the bottom of a beer bottle. Back in court, things took a sharp turn. I'd already lost count of the number of times I'd been threatened with contempt, but this time I came dangerously close to testing that warning. "You're disgusting," I snapped at Robin. "Filthy. If you tell me it was just some intimate exploration, I'll gladly do a few nights in jail. Hell, I'll move to Afghanistan where they still know how to deal with adulterers." Robin's mouth fell open. Her therapist, Dr. Landers, cleared her throat and tried to recover some kind of control in the room. "Well, Mr. Carson," she said calmly, "what you have to understand is that in modern relationships, it's not uncommon for happily married couples to explore intimacy with others. There's nothing inherently wrong with—" "What the hell are you babbling about?" I barked, rising halfway out of my chair. "Many couples find that shared intimacy outside the relationship enhances—" "Let me stop you right there," I interrupted. "This is a courtroom, not a TED Talk. You want to talk about open marriages? Fine. But that wasn't what we had. Don't rewrite history just to make her cheating sound enlightened." I stood up and pointed at Robin. "You want to tell the judge how uncooperative I've been? Be my guest. I don't give a single flying rat's what she does to me. But I'll tell you this, it'll be a cold day in the underworld before I ever get within 10 feet of that woman again." Then I turned to Dr. Landers and said flatly, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer. I'll be pushing to have your license yanked, you twisted excuse for a professional." Walking out of that courtroom, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: relief. Like I'd finally taken the wheel of my own life back. I got in my truck and drove straight to Bert's office. He'd been handling divorce law for 30 years, and the moment he saw me, he gave me that look, like he knew this wasn't going to be a routine visit. I didn't even care that I hadn't cleaned up from the storm damage the night before. That could wait. This was the first step toward getting my life back. That night, half the city crew, including me, was out in dump trucks running sand and road base down to the levees near the river. It had been raining hard all week up in the mountains, and between that and the evening storm, the river had risen dangerously fast. By 2 a.m., water was already pressing against two critical dirt levees and lapping at the foundation of the old lime road bridge. We worked through the night, headlights cutting through fog and rain, tires sinking into wet gravel. Around 4 a.m. the Army Corps of Engineers finally announced the dike was holding. The worst had passed for now. The county gave us the all clear, and for once something went right. The next day Brenda drove me to a section of town I hadn't seen in years, downtown, where a cluster of abandoned buildings stood like relics from a forgotten past. The city had bought up the whole block over a decade ago, hoping some big-name developer would swoop in and revitalize it. It was prime real estate once, before the city let it rot. What struck me as odd was that every time someone tried to buy one of those properties, the city board shot it down. Didn't matter if it was a small firm or a big developer with cash in hand, the answer was always no. The board in charge of selling city land was made up of 5 trustees. Unanimous vote required. But the ballots were secret, so no one ever knew who was killing the deals. And now, somehow, I was right in the middle of it. Meanwhile, Brenda opened up to me in a way I hadn't expected. We were sitting in the truck, watching rain streak down the windshield. "There are guys who want me," she said quietly. "Plenty of them. They'll use me when they want to feel something, but none of them want to be with me." She laughed, bitter and tired. "I've had 3 boyfriends who'd show me off in secret, then parade around with someone respectable in public. I know what people say. I hear the jokes, Jack. They call me Butterface. Great body, but her face. And the other one? A 3-bagger. One for me, one for him in case mine slips, and one by the door in case someone walks in and sees the train wreck." I didn't know what to say. You never really think about what a person's carrying until they lay it out bare. Later that week I met with the city manager. The idea I'd pitched, to repurpose those abandoned buildings, had caught fire. We were able to secure funding, and since the deal came in under $150,000, we didn't even need to submit a full budget proposal. As I walked out of his office he stopped me. "Jack," he said, "I'm putting your name in for a promotion. You just saved us at least $500,000. If this all comes together, and I believe it will, I want more guys like you around. Thinkers. People who get it done." By Wednesday we had every approval and permit we needed. I was officially in charge of overseeing the site's cleanup, security, and eventual upgrade. They assigned me a 10-man crew. For the first time in weeks I felt useful again, like I was building something that mattered. But behind all that progress I knew a storm was still brewing. Mike, our contact in city legal, had been collecting information for weeks, pulling files, cross-checking contracts, poking at inconsistencies. I didn't know when he was going to drop the hammer, but it was coming. And when it did, Judge Sonia Kagan and her husband were going to take the brunt of it. Her husband worked in the DA's office, and if what we suspected was true, they were both knee-deep in shady land deals tied to the very board that kept blocking the sales. Stonemore's district attorney, Jim Morrison, had a reputation. He didn't tolerate scandal or anything that might embarrass the office. If even a whiff of corruption reached his desk, heads rolled. And soon, one of them was likely to be Judge Kagan's. Before leaving the building that day, I passed by Dr. Landers, Robin's so-called therapist. She looked smaller now, less confident. Almost pathetic. "Screw you," I said without slowing down. About 20 minutes later, Robin was back in session with her beloved therapist. I wasn't there, but I could imagine how that meeting went. She probably tried to tell her side of the story. Probably claimed I was being unreasonable. Cold. Angry. Well, yeah. No kidding. But even I had to admit, part of me was curious. Not sympathetic, just curious. How does someone justify what she did? What lies does she tell herself to make it all seem okay? I knew I'd find out soon enough. When I stepped into his office, the tension hit me like a wall. Before I could even sit, he gave me a look and said, "You're gonna have to hold off on scratching that itch, Terry. There's no club meeting tonight." I just stood there stunned. "Jack found out," he added. "The whole thing. And he's threatening to go to Mike Starr with it. If he does, it'll blow up in the faces of some very important people." I don't know how he pieced it all together, but he's in a position to seriously embarrass a lot of folks. Then he turned to Robin, looking like he'd just bitten into something rotten. "I swear, Robin, getting involved with you was a mistake. Whatever you were offering wasn't worth this." His words hit like a slap across the room. Later that day, I filed the official petition for divorce. The next thing I remember was sitting on the floor, being helped into a chair by a paramedic. "Ma'am, can you tell me how many fingers I'm holding up?" she asked gently. It had all spiraled out of control in just 3 weeks. The chaos unfolded like dominoes falling faster than anyone could stop them. The local TV news picked up the story, and suddenly the quiet scandal of the town's hidden swinger circle was headline material. They didn't just report on it, they dragged it into the daylight, exposing everyone involved. Judge Sonia Kagan was immediately suspended from the bench. A formal investigation followed, and the talk was she'd likely face criminal charges. Her husband? He wasn't so lucky. He was fired the same day and hauled into court a week later, facing charges tied to a shady prescription racket he'd been part of on the side. I don't remember exactly what I said when I first let it all out in public. My voice broke, my hands were shaking, but when I paused to catch my breath and wipe my eyes, I noticed people staring. A small crowd had gathered. And Jack? He just stood there calmly, no shame, no anger. Then, with a smirk, he turned slightly, pointed at his back pocket, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Eat my butt, and die." Then he walked off, not looking back. 4 years later, Jack was living in Las Vegas. Back in the present, I pulled into the driveway of our little house and stared at the lawn. It was a mess. The kind of dry, patchy mess that makes your neighbors talk. But I didn't care. I'd mow it Saturday morning just after sunrise before the heat cranked up to triple digits. I wasn't drinking too much anymore. Brenda would swing by most nights with dinner and we'd sit together on the couch, eating and watching old movies or laughing at ridiculous reality shows. On weekends we'd get out of town, drive somewhere quiet just to breathe. The more time I spent with her, the more I realized something strange. I liked being seen with her. I wasn't hiding anymore. There was nothing secret or shameful. It felt right. One day as we stood in the grocery store checkout lane, I told her how Robin had begged me to take her back. Brenda got real quiet. Her eyes welled up and for a moment I thought she was about to break. "I have zero intention of ever going back to her," I said gently. "Brenda, I'm falling for you." She looked up at me, soft and strong all at once, and nodded. That night, as she worked on her class notes before her study group arrived, I headed to the den, cracked a cold one, and turned on the Rockies game on the satellite. From one gamble of a woman to another, I'd landed somewhere real. Somewhere solid. My life had been burned down and rebuilt, and for once, it finally felt like mine again.